Get started.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I think we'll get started. It's 5:32. I'm sure a few people might still dribble in and they'll miss the important stuff like introductions and who we are and all that stuff, but it shouldn't be too bad because I know everyone wants to get home before 10 o'clock tonight. They prefer it not be like a regular council meeting, you know? So anyways, my name's Sean Merriman, and I am the manager of building and bylaw here at the town of Prescott. And I'm also the planning administrator here in Prescott until we get something complicated and then we ship it out to the professionals. So a lot of yous may know me. We're very pleased to host this with the counties and our two, what I call sister organizations, Augusta and Edwardsburg Cardinal, because in the end, we're a region that really gets, A, we get along good to begin with, but B, it's important we get along because in the end, all we've got's each other, because Lord knows we can't trust anyone else to come help us. And we'll go from there. Just some housekeeping things. I do want to let you know that we are being recorded. There is an owl up here. The concept is, if it works pretty good, Matthew will edit out what I call the garbage at the beginning and the end and just put it online. The problem is we don't know for sure we can put it up there because sometimes when there's a lot of people in a room, it picks up too many stuff and it becomes just too cluttered and you can't hear really anything. I will give all our guests a chance to introduce themselves so that I don't mess up any names or anything like that. I can tell you there are bathrooms here. They're down the stairs and to the left, or down the elevator and through the door and to the left. And I think that's just about it for housekeeping then. I do appreciate everyone coming. We actually sold out, which for a municipal event shouldn't really happen, but it does happen apparently. We will probably have another one should you wish. Probably January or February. We'll see. It won't be before Christmas as much as some people might like it before. So we'll go from there and I'll turn it over to the county first. So Carolyn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Caroline Ragudo. I'm the Affordable Housing Coordinator at the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville.
My name is Melissa Bamford. I'm the planner at the Township of Augusta.
Hi, I'm Wendy. I'm the Community Development Coordinator with the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal.
I'm Dwayne Crawford. I'm the Chief Building Official for the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal.
Oh, I get to kick us off here.
You get to kick us
So
off.
I'm gonna start with, get us through the first few slides. I'm gonna talk about what is an additional residential unit, and I'm also gonna talk a little bit about what a tiny home is. So an additional residential unit, we also call these ARUs. Hi, welcome guys, come on in. There's a few seats up at the front here too. We also call these ARUs. We love our acronyms, so additional residential units, ARUs. You might also hear them called secondary suites or additional dwelling units, ADUs, garden suites or in-law suites. In Edwardsburg Cardinal, you might also hear second dwellings or second dwelling units. So that's what we're talking about when we say ARUs or additional residential units. These are self-contained units with their own private kitchen, bathroom, and sleeping area. So it's a separate dwelling created either within your home or in another building in your property. Hi guys, we have smaller seats. There's one up here. And I think there might be a few at the back. So you might have a family member to live in your additional residential unit or someone you hope to keep close by. You can also rent these out to another person or family. An ARU might be occupied by any person. This is regardless of whether the primary residential unit is occupied by the owner of the property. So you don't necessarily have to be the one living in the principal dwelling. An ARU can be a separate dwelling unit within the primary dwelling. So here in on the slide, you can see an example of a basement unit. And then also an example of like a second unit that's in the upper story, but these are both these ARUs are still within the primary dwelling. And then another example within the primary dwelling is maybe converting the upper floor of the upper story of a garage or building that as an addition, or maybe you want to use your garage a little bit better and maybe convert your garage into an additional residential unit. In my house, that would solve the problem of who gets to park in the garage over the winter.
That's good.
also as a additional residential unit. It might not be inside the primary dwelling at all. It could be detached. Maybe you've got a detached garage already that you want to convert into an ARU, or a different accessory building on your property that you could convert into an ARU, or it could be an entirely new structure altogether. And that's usually where we start talking about tiny homes, which I'm going to get to in just a second. So Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing has created a guide to help homeowners plan and build an ARU. This guide is created for those who want to include an ARU within their principal dwelling, but it also mentions that if you're planning for a detached structure, most of the information within that guide is still going to apply. And I do need copies of the guide out in the lobby.
Oh, they aren't printed up, but they are found online just
Okay.
by searching the name.
All right. So the guide doesn't replace your zoning bylaw or the Ontario building code, so it's really important to check your local zoning bylaw to learn what the zoning of the property is and see what is permitted in that zone.
Apparently it's provincial law, you can only have one extra unit
No,
on your property. I was just at City Hall in North Augusta, Town.
well, yes, in North Augusta, because it's on, it doesn't have civil services.
Hmm.
Okay, so the town of Prescott is allowed more than that because we're on city services, but we'll get to that when we get to it shortly, but yes.
Okay, yeah. No, but this program doesn't change that at all, right?
No.
Oh, the funding.
Oh, the funding. The funding just looks at an approved unit. So once we get through all of the building and planning, once you have a building permit, regardless of how many units are allowed on there, I can talk about the funding.
We'll move through these
So-
fast, so we can get to the
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, the money.
So talking about tiny homes, these often come up when we talk about ARUs because your second dwelling might actually be what you consider a tiny home. But a tiny home could also be the primary and only dwelling on your property as well without an ARU. A tiny home is a small, private and self-contained dwelling with living and or dining area. With kitchen and bathroom facilities and with a sleeping area. They're intended for year-round use. A trailer, recreational vehicle, mobile home is not considered a tiny home. You can build a tiny home in South Grenville, but it still needs to meet the provisions of your local zoning bylaw and of course the Ontario Building Code. It is really tough to talk about our zoning bylaws here because with 3 municipalities, we're all gonna have some different provisions there, and Melissa's gonna get
It's
to
an
that.
Ontario, it's an Ontario provincial law according to Augusta Township. I was there 2 months ago.
So, I can just quickly speak to that. So yes, as a right, everyone has to permit an additional residential unit. But how they specifically regulate varies from municipality to municipality. So, for example, in Augusta, the maximum size that an additional residential unit can be is 45% of the main house, which includes all of the floors, whether it's finished or not. But Edwardsburg Cardinal, I think, has a different number. 50%.
But
So
your
it's
maximum-
that tweaking that's different between municipalities, but rural municipalities that are unserviced at this point. The provincial government was talking about doing some changes, but that's not in place yet.
That's what
Yeah,
said when I was
they did
there.
kind of, yeah, they were talking about expanding the 2, but a lot of stuff's been put on hold with provincial changes. So, but right now, the rural municipalities that are unserviced is just 1, but Prescott, which is serviced, would be 2.
And technically, a third one if it was in an accessory building
Right,
outside of it.
Right,
So
they have more opportunity because they're
Mm.
serviced,
Mm.
right? So.
As if you're not serviced in the.
So
Counties,
we'll
right?
hold all the questions to the end, because a lot of this information will probably be covered through the slides, and then we would be very happy to answer all the questions.
Last to touch on with tiny homes is that they're, not last. With the tiny home, when you're talking about how big or how tiny is tiny, it can't be smaller than the minimum required size set out in the Ontario Building Code, which is 17.5 meters squared or 188 feet squared. Can't imagine. They would be really quick to clean, I'm sure.
you hope.
And they're really hard to clean because there's so much stuff.
Edwardsburg Cardinal doesn't have a minimum size other than what's in the building code, but check your local municipal zoning bylaw in case they have a minimum size that's greater than that. That's all I wanted to say about that. And Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing has a guide for this as well. It's available online for building or buying a tiny home. as well, and that's meant as a new structure, not for converting an existing structure.
Melissa.
Sure, I'll speak to zoning. So obviously, our first point of contact would be in the planning department, so Sean, who's planning building. Just to get the specifics of the municipality, whether you're Prescott, Edwardsburg, Cardinal, or Augusta. Because we each do have our own separate zoning bylaws where there may be some specifics in it. Again, we do permit, I'll permit them, but it's just the exact specifics of size, location, setbacks, that kind of thing that can vary on how it's serviced from municipality to municipality. For example, some municipalities require that it be on a shared septic and well, where some municipalities don't require it to be shared servicing. So just check with myself, Wendy, or Sean, and we're happy to go through the specifics with you for your municipality. So and again, we do recommend that you just reach out to us early. We're happy to talk to you about it at any time. Accessible, affordable housing units such as tiny homes and secondary homes are exciting for municipalities. It does provide you with some opportunities for aging in place. Children like myself who may never afford a house now, and to rent. Since we don't really people zone, we allow you opportunities where we can. So for those affordable housing options. Again, the zoning requirements will be specific in terms of number of units. We kind of talked about that. The minimum and maximum size of additional residential unit. So again, like I said, Augusta's 45, I think Prescott and Edwardsburg Cardinal are 50%. Affordable housing, secondary units are supposed to be an affordable housing option, which is why we kind of asked them to be smaller than the main dwelling house. It's not a second house on your property. It's supposed to be an affordable housing option, which is why that size limit is in there. There'll be setback requirements from property lines and from the road. Again, that will vary. Parking requirements. Typically, we would ask for a parking space. Again, it will vary from municipality to municipality. How you access it, whether you have to have a shared entrance or a separate driveway, will vary between municipalities. Like I said, the servicing, Prescott's obviously on municipal services, but Edwardsburg, Cardinal, and Augusta are on private services. Whether there's any requirements for a shared outdoor amenity space. But again, that just varies from municipality. And I know Augusta does have some information on their website, probably Prescott and Edwardsburg Cardinal do as well, with some general information and some pamphlets that kind of break it down easily, but please reach out. We're happy to go through that specifically with you.
What are the tax implications?
So does anyone have really had much experience? So MPAC, taxes are obviously assessed by the municipal. Do you want me to speak to that? Property Assessment Corporation. I don't really know exactly how they come up with numbers, but the building officials are required to provide them with building permits. So that would trigger possibly a reassessment. I don't know what that would be based on. I don't know. If
Based on value.
Yeah, based on
Of the
value.
entire property.
Yeah, so.
So yes, there's tax implications.
Yeah.
Because you would up the value of your
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, and if you put any structure on your property, it would up the value, but but again, exactly what that is. And you could also reach out to MPAC. They may be able to, they have a 1-800 number or a local office in Rockville. That they can maybe give you an idea, a ballpark of the assessment, and at least you have an idea. We can help you with the tax rate and kind of figure out what the difference would be. So you just have an idea.
But the better you make it, the more it'll cost. And I can tell you, it might be a good reason for a tiny house.
There's a lot when you say about driveway regulations and that. Well, Prescott mustn't have any.
Oh, no, we do.
No way.
Yeah.
I
I didn't say it's not great parking. I just said we have some. But and Prescott is fairly lenient in that we insist on one space, but you are allowed to shuffle the cars to get them in. Instead of having just your own that you have to get to, so. And if you're downtown, you may not need any, so. Okay, but we'll continue on.
So next.
Edwardsburg Cardinal being a blended township, we have service areas.
Yeah, we have
So
service
does
areas.
that account for extra units potentially in the hamlets of, say, New Wexford and Spencerville?
It's both gonna be the same, so in Edwardsburg Cardinal, you're allowed one ARU that's within the principal dwelling, and you're allowed an ARU that is a separate structure, so you could technically have two ARUs on your one.
Okay, but not two buildings, not three buildings with two outside.
Correct, yeah,
Service area.
correct, and if you're on private servicing, so well and septic, your ARU needs to share the same servicing as the principal dwelling. If you're on municipal servicing, they would both just be on municipal.
What's the reason behind that, where it has to be on your sector?
Well, the intent is for it to be secondary to the main dwelling, so it's not meant to be like I know it's its own dwelling, but it's still meant to be secondary and it kind of accessory to the main dwelling, and it also prevents it from being able to sever it later on and create a new lot that way.
Okay, yeah, I guess that makes.
And it depends on, again, the zoning, sometimes it can be either, but it's Ricardo that's required shared. Augusta, you could do it separate or you could do it shared.
Yeah.
You have the option, but,
Yeah, they could never cover it.
well, if you could, if it meets, if it meets the official plan policies for severance, you could sever it. We're trying not to set these up for severances, because that's really not the intent of them, but I mean, if it's far enough away and
Take
the
it up
lot's
to
big
that
enough. and it meets-
severances already.
Yeah, we do limit the number of severances you can have overall, but that's not the intent, is if you build a house and then we let you sever it. But if it does comply and meets the other policies, there is potential, at least in Augusta. It wouldn't if you're, obviously, if you're tied and close, as Edwardsburg Cardinal might require, so again, it just varies between municipalities, so. And there are certain areas where they're not permitted, that's on the previous slide, such as floodplains, obviously we don't want any structures really going in there, nor does your insurance company. Like some home daycares, bed and breakfast establishments, group homes, and there's some limited service zones, that may not permit them, those are some private roads. There may be provisions that don't permit them because of that kind of a situation, so, but the rest, generally overall, they're permitted, so. I guess it's like that, so back to rezoning, so if you don't comply, with all of the requirements of the municipality, there is option for relief. The two things are rezonings and minor variances. So say, for example, I'll just again use Augusta as an example, just because I know it. 45% is the maximum, that your additional residential unit could be. If you wanted to apply for a minor variance, which has to be minor, so not, you couldn't apply for like 98% size ARU for your main house, but say if you were like 50%, that would be absolutely considered minor, and you could apply for relief through the committee of adjustment. Same as setbacks, that kind of thing, those zone provisions are the rules, but there is a leeway for minor adjustments depending on your property, but there's a process, so.
Cities are gonna try to work with people.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely encouraging additional residential units, and, you know, obviously we have to bear in mind that you do have neighbors, and we don't wanna have a negative impact on your neighbors, but if there's minor modifications that are needed, that's something that planning staff would kind of assess. And then we give you some direction of whether it was an appropriate request and whether a minor variance was appropriate, or if it's something more major, that's a rezoning. So that's a council approval versus a minor, which is a committee of adjustment approval. So that's generally it for zoning, and again, we can answer some specific questions after if anyone has any.
We'll talk about the building permit process, the ADUs or the tiny homes, require building permit to, before you can install them on your property or build them. And depending on, where you're located, like Edwardsburg Cardinal has a mix of, areas that are primary rural on private sewers and septic systems and wells. And then we have other areas in the municipality where we're on, municipal service. So, if you're in an area where there's septic system as well, you're most definitely gonna need to have your existing septic system reviewed before you can apply for a building permit. The process isn't any different than a regular house or an addition to a house, so there's drawings required. And there could be some other issues with regards to, depending on where you're located, maybe having a review of your proposed work to be done by, let's say, the conservation authority. Because they're very much interested in development on the lands that are adjacent to waterways. The only thing that's different with, let's say, a tiny home is, if you are buying a, let's say, just a shell, and it's a manufacturer who's outside your community, that manufacturer has to get a building permit from the municipality that they're in. And that basically is to ensure that the structure that is being constructed meets the building code. So you would have to get that building permit, and then you'd have to get a building permit in the municipality where you're going to erect that particular structure. So that building permit will accompany you with your application.
So this would be something like if you wanted to buy a container, a shipping container?
Not necessarily, well, if you're gonna buy a shipping container, you're still gonna need some type of engineered drawings to accompany that container. But let's say you go to, I know there's a place in Brockville that sells Amish sheds, for example, okay? Well, you could go there and you could buy one there, so that's the size of the building that you're looking for. So somebody built that.
Right.
So whoever built that has to get a building permit from the municipality
That they live in.
Okay, and that would be just to cover the structural part of the building. Then when you move the building to the municipality, your municipality where you're gonna put it up, there's all that interior work that has to be done.
Right.
And that's subject to inspections also. So that would mean that you need to get another building permit. Now, I know our building permit bylaw doesn't look at, reduction in fees, but that's definitely has to be looked at, because you're not gonna be paying full fee again.
Right.
But it's just something that you should be aware of.
What about stamped drawings though? If somebody buys an on shed and gets stamped by PNG or an architect, would that not suffice?
If the building is gonna be totally constructed on your property, it's quite satisfactory. But if you're taking it to a builder who's gonna build something and then move it as a,
Small home trade, come in on a
small
trailer,
building,
be
you're
put
gonna
down
move
on the
that
pad
building.
of the property.
then you have to have that permit.
But would as-built drawings stamped by professional engineer, architect, and material, would that not suffice?
No, because even when you have stamped drawings, you still need a building permit.
And you
So
still need,
wherever it came from.
and you still need proof of inspection.
If it's got the framing, then when you get the second permit, installation barrier and finishing, fine.
That's right.
Namath Shed probably isn't the best example, but there is a place in Brockville that's building tiny homes. Brockville inspects every single inspection. They do the framing, they do the HVAC, they do the insulation. When it gets moved to a hosting community, that paperwork follows with it. Then they take out a foundation permit and they add the plumbing to hook up to the services and the septic and stuff like that.
That's correct.
Okay, so I have a question. If you are buying a shell, let's say a shipping container shell, do you need a structural engineer drawing for that? Because that shell comes with a certified certificate saying it's engineered for shipping across.
Right, but it's for shipping, not living.
The thing,
But can I hire that same structural engineer to sign both and his?
He will sign both and technically you bring it to your host community where you're going to turn it into a tiny home.
So you can't take a professional's.
We take it, but it's still gotta have, even when it's a professional, we got a water tower being built in Prescott right now that's all done by professionals. It still needs a building permit in the host community. So you may not need it because you're just buying a shipping container.
Yeah,
And shipping it to wherever, because it was never really built wherever, but
Yeah.
the host community is still going to need that stamp drawing. Then you're going to need additional stamp drawings that deal with converting it from a shipping container to a house.
yeah, so I understand the stamp drawings for the conversion part.
Yeah.
What I don't understand is how some townships are getting the shipping containers in and using the structural certification as their stamp.
Again, speak to that,
Yeah.
that person and go from there.
I can only speak to the fact that each building official has its own, basically its own interpretation of how they enforce the building for that. Okay, so if that could be part of it, but the other thing you have to remember too, is that the shipping container itself is beyond the scope of the building, the building code. So if it's beyond the scope of the building code, then definitely anything that's being done with that structure is gonna require a, something certified. Okay. It's just that we don't have the ability to take a look at that shipping container and say, yeah, that's adequate. So we have to rely on a professional. Okay,
Sorry, just before you go, that previous group had one factory built homes, like with CSA certification.
Yeah.
So speak to the CSA certification. What would be required?
oh, the CSA,
Yeah.
Well, MH270,
yeah, it's constructed to that,
Standard.
to that standard, it's inspected by the factory that it constructs it. And
it provides certificates.
when we receive it, it's actually is certified. So we look at it as a.
So are there two, is it the CSA, the 240 MH and the
Yes.
H277?
That's right.
A277, and there's also another one coming for tiny homes. And there's also park model homes, which are seasonal, but again, all different standards. Still need a building permit when they come to the host community, simply because there's still foundations and stuff to still look up.
But the CSA is like 240 MH is
That's for a mobile home, and again, it may,
manufactured.
yeah.
And actual, correct.
Yeah. So that certificate would accompany the building permit process.
Correct.
In other words, as a customer, I would say, I purchased this prefabricated structure, here's a certificate of compliance.
That's correct.
It's not been my experience in lead rental, but.
Yeah, I got a feeling it's more of a zoning issue with them, because sometimes there's issues with that, but I can't speak to anything else other than this local area, so. Okay. Yeah, we can go there. So, the one thing that I would like to bring up. Often everyone thinks they want to do this, but there's some things that come up that create problems. Every house has the capability to become, have a secondary dwelling or to have what, an accessory suite, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes people don't like the costs that go along with it, and unfortunately, there's not much I can do about the cost that come around from the construction with it. So even though in Prescott, you're allowed to have more than one unit on the place. One of the things you have to pay attention to, especially in Prescott, is sometimes the houses coming in only had a half-inch line coming from the main. All of a sudden, you're adding more kitchens, laundries, everything else. As you increase that, the size servicing that unit or structure for both of them has to increase. Unfortunately, sometimes we're talking $20,000 to $40,000. Okay, because we have to rip up the road, we have to hook into the thing, it has to be done by a qualified contractor that the town hires out. The town doesn't make a dime on it, but it doesn't change the fact what it costs by the time you rip up the road, hook in the new system. It's not so much sewer, for the most part, sewer is always big enough, but water lines especially can be too small. We had one person create one, it said in my building permit, servicing to be confirmed for sizing. They found out partway through the thing, so please pay attention when you're looking at the thing. Each project is unique. That's the biggest thing I can't stress enough. Each project is unique. Just because it worked for someone else, you may not understand all the nuances why it worked for them more than it'll work for you. And one of the things that you'll want to check out too is, like, I can't speak to the rural areas because they might have issues in relation to how much the well pumps per minute and stuff like that. But in the city, it comes down to that size of the line coming in from from the water main, and unfortunately, if it's a half inch. Dave's here, will that even service one house now? You know, you're probably looking at upgrading it to 5/8, 3/4, maybe even an inch. You may want to upgrade it to the bigger amount when you're doing it, because the cost doesn't really change a whole lot in terms, you know, other than the price of the copper, but. That's part of the things that you get into and that you're worried about and stuff like that, so that's. One of the things that I want to bring up with servicing in the rural areas, you're more worried about septic capacity. Some of these tanks in the rural areas went in before it was, what is it now, 800 gallon minimum?
Thousand, no,
Is it 1,000? Okay, because I've been dealing with the city, but
it's 800 before.
yeah, and it was 600 before that, so sometimes you end up with a 600 gallon tank and you're going, what do you mean I gotta replace the whole system to do this? But though, that's what I'm talking about, doing your research, figuring out whether or not it'll work, because just because every place can have a second place, it's up to you to decide if it's worth it to do it. One of the other things that I like to remind people too, when you're doing this. Plumbing sounds like it's an easy solution, and a lot of times it is, but it is important to talk to a plumber. Because sometimes you'll find out that the plumbing, when you're talking about 2 units, depending how far apart they are and how well things line up. Again, your costs can really escalate if you got a bathroom at this end of the house and another bathroom at the other end with the kitchen and everything else. All these things have a really big effect on the total cost that it's going to take.
What about hydro? Like, we need more hydro.
Yeah, and that's another thing,
What is-
talking about servicing, you may have to go from 100 amps to 200 amps, or 200 amps to a 200 amp plus a pony for 100. All these things affect what you need, and part of that comes down to the individual project and how much you want to put into it. So Prescott has had 22 ARUs put in already in the last 3 or 4 years. So we're getting pretty good at that, asking the people, but we've had a lot of people, they make choices. Because they want an ARU, they take out the dishwasher on their one side. Or they share a laundry for services instead of having one for both. All these things make choices to how much power you need, how much plumbing you need, and how much sewage capacity you need. And so that's what I mean. So sometimes a tiny home, it might only be 188 square feet, but if that's what you're servicing easily services, you may want to consider it at that point.
So hydro is,
Hydro is a consideration. It is ESA is a totally separate permit from the town, which is Electrical Safety Authority. You have to reach out to them. They will determine how much power you need for this, whatever you're proposing. So the biggest thing to start with is a site sketch, at least knowing roughly what you want. Then we start going from there. And I do really recommend you use a designer. Any homeowner has the right to do their own plans, and it's not rocket science. At the same point, if you don't do it every day, it can feel like rocket science. Okay, and a good set of plans, again, the plans will kind of like a contractor fluctuate in price, but the more you can take your designer that you know what you want and what you can't do without, they can do it fast, quick, efficiently, and then you got a good set of plans to work from. And I've even
easier to get approval as well.
easier to get approval too, because like I said, they're doing it on a regular basis. And it's not that we won't work with someone, we will. We'll keep working till we get there, but I can see how people can get frustrated some days. Because it can be tough to understand, because not only are you dealing with the regular house that you have normal construction, but now you're getting into fire separation, smoke detection, all these things. And like I say, depending on how your house is or your structure is lined up, some fire separation, super simple. It's just up the middle or across the thing, and there's no boxing or anything like that. Other ones, let's just say it gets complicated, but you got to make sure a fire doesn't have an easy way to transfer from one part to the other part of the house.
Yeah, the other thing you'll be asked for too is an energy efficiency summary.
Summary, yeah.
And they're not the easiest to fill out or even to calculate, so you are gonna need some professional help.
Well, you may.
Yeah.
People can and do still get it done sometimes.
Can I take you back to the septic system?
Yep,
You're saying you had a 600. Now, one of the things about what you're discussing here is that it has to go onto the main, onto that same septic system.
yeah, which means taking out the
So you
600,
have
putting
to-
in it.
Yeah, you couldn't put in another 800 or whatever the code is now. So they have two separate systems.
Possibly.
Maybe, not all municipalities require it to be shared, and if it does require to share, it might be upgrading. But if you do require shared, you'd have to reach out to use
The conservation
sanitation.
authority, yes.
Yeah, sanitation conservation issues septic on behalf of Edwardsburg Cardinal as well as on behalf of Augusta. They would, okay, so in Augusta, you could do either. You can do your own separate system, your own separate sewage system or whatever.
But you would still be
sanitation is.
upgrading it from the system you currently have. is what
Well, you
you're
could
saying.
leave your other system
No,
alone.
It would be there, but it's still an upgrade, meaning
Right.
that it's got more capacity now.
Right, so yeah, but anyway, reach out to South Nation is an office can give you contact there to reach out to see what kind of system could be accommodated. Whether it's cheaper to upgrade your current system or whether it might be cheaper to do a separate system. But again, Augusta permits that. I don't think Edwardsburg Cardinal has that same provision, so I don't want to mislead anybody. It is check with your local municipality.
Thank you.
What about prefabricated, holding tanks?
In general, not allowed.
I have a question. What about alternative waste management systems like composting toilet, incinerating toilet, like? If you didn't have the capacity.
Yeah, but that's
could-
still a septic system, but it wouldn't be an on-site sewage. It would be a class 2 septic system coupled with class 1 technically, is it composting?
Yeah, because your composting still requires gray water disposal,
Okay,
and the gray
Yeah.
water system is subject to reviewed by the conservation authority. That's under part 8 also,
okay,
so you still are gonna need a permit
yeah,
for the class version.
yeah, but
And if you go, but you could find solutions. All I'm saying is each one's individual,
There
are-
you'd still have to reach out.
okay,
There are situations where I know of where people are using compost toilet
yeah,
and gray water.
okay, so there is a viability there to
It's
use those
possible, yeah.
systems, yeah, okay.
The other thing that you want to consider is heating and ventilation. On one hand, there's a lot of pluses to using a system that's already in a structure. However, if it's using a fuel source system like propane, natural gas, oil, anything that where you're burning something, you end up needing an HVAC smoke detector put in your furnace by the return air. You've also got issues with smell transferring between the two units easier, noise transferring between the two units easier. And how to say this nicely? You have to consider what you're building it for. So if it's truly for an in-law suite or a student that's coming back or a child that's coming back because of, you know, death, divorce, whatever the case may be, you have a little bit more leeway because, let's face it, you can beat them up if they complain too much. But if you're renting this out to someone who has the right to call the Landlord Tribunal Act, or they can call the town for property standards, the first thing that's going to happen is that bylaw officer, which I happen to do in Prescott when I'm wearing a different hat, I'm going to look at the building permit and say, well, you didn't put any sound retention in and you're sharing a heating system. I'm going to give you an order to correct it. So these are what I'm talking about, the individual things that you want to take a look at and why each project has to be really considered individual. There's no really cookie cutter answer for each one. Again, electrical and lighting, a light switch in every room, switch at the bottom and top of the stairs, or what's known as the three-way switch. And again, I rephrase, you need an ESA permit. Your electrician will take it, a licensed electrician will take it out for you. You will also need it at occupancy, at least in Prescott, and I'm pretty sure in Edwardsburg Cardinal and Augusta, to prove that it was done under the right way.
Yeah.
Again, the last thing is fire separation, and again, a fire separation is important. And again, that's when they say you may wish to add soundproofing. I will be always very clear with you, soundproofing in an ARU is not required under the building code. Not required. I'm not gonna pretend it is required, it's not. It's not like building an apartment building where they would tell you you need to have a sound transmission code, sound transmission control not higher than 50. But you may seriously want to consider doing it anyways, because again, depending on who you're renting it to and whether or not they can call someone to complain about that you're doing it. And let's face it, if you're getting into the landlord business, it's important you understand all the regulations that go under that. It's not as easy as it sounds some days. I encourage anyone to do it that wants to do it, but it is not easy. It is not going to make you $1 million quickly, so. And again, the fire separation, again, it all comes down to whether or not you have shared services. So for example, you both come in the same entrance, but you both go in separate doors to your unit. The door going to the outside doesn't need to be fireproof, but in the common area, the two going into the separate units do need to be fire rated. Fire rated between the walls and the ceilings and everything else like that, and making sure it's all closed off, whether or not you're using the same HVAC equipment, all this stuff affects it. And again, why I stress that you may want to consider a professional designer to do it. Life safety, it brings up the special smoke detector, UL 268. Basically what it is, it's not about fire, but when it detects smoke, it shuts down the thing so we don't pump smoke into both units, because smoke is really what gets you quick. Okay, and it just shuts down the unit until it gets reset and figures out what the problem is. There's different types. There's some that go with basically the ions and the air. It's not even really detecting smoke, is it? It's more the ions and the chemicals and stuff like that. That's what it's detecting, but as soon as it detects it, it shuts it down. If anyone wants to see a really cool picture of something when they didn't have that, Google fire MGM Las Vegas. It looked like the whole hotel was on fire. It really did, because it was pumping smoke everywhere because there was no control to shut down how the HVAC system spread it. Not the way you want to learn that you really want to have that sort of stuff. Egress options, again, there's a million different ones. In general, I tend to see option A and B. C is very tough to do because you end up basically fireproofing the entire dwelling that you're using as an egress, like a corridor to get out. Can it be done? Yes, but I don't know that, I don't think I've ever seen it. Maybe, have you ever seen one, Dwayne? And the other thing that I want to mention about egress options, one flight up, one flight down, no big deal. You go 2 flights up though, you got to have a second means of getting out. And that just means addressing what those issues are. It's not that tough, but it is something that you got to think about, because sometimes people will have a 3-story home, old farmhouse or whatever the case may be. I've had a few 3-story situations where we had to figure out a second solution getting out. So again, I guess this is where I end, I guess, right? When we switch over to you guys.
Talk about escape windows.
Oh, the escape windows, well, that was part of the egress, yeah, so. If you pick option B, a second means of egress must be provided for the bedrooms and emergency exit lighting is provided. Again, if you're in a basement, you can have in the bedroom an egress window. If you're up on the 3rd floor as a second means of egress, it can be an egress window. Understand that the basement escape window is not quite the same as an egress window off the 3rd floor. They're similar, but they're slightly bigger when it's a pure egress window, so.
That's right.
And then, like I say, reach out to each municipality, although we're very similar. And I probably think 98% of us and the rules are the same, but it's the 2% of the rules that are different that drive you crazy. Reach out, we'll be more than happy to explain it to the best of our ability.
And we'll work with you.
And we'll work with you. And so now we move back to the county.
All right. Hi, I'm Caroline again. I just wanted to take a moment to tell you guys about 2 different funding programs that the county's offers. We have one that's geared towards homeowners for making a secondary suite unit on the property of your primary residence. And then there's one for landlords that's for creating a secondary suite unit on the property of an existing residential rental unit. The purpose of the funding programs are to make more affordable housing units in the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville. Both programs are both essentially the same with a few differences. So the differences with the homeowner one is it's funded through the province. And again, it must be constructed on your primary residence, so it's where you live. The funding is for 1 unit up to a maximum of $25,000. And the applicant can own other properties. So if you have a cottage or other land, that doesn't make you ineligible for the program, but the project must be located where you reside. The landlord program is actually funded through the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, and it is eligible to small landlords. So if you own between 1 and 10 units that are under the Residential Tenancies Act, The program funding for this is up to $50,000 for one unit. Now, for both programs for eligible costs, again, it must be to create a new secondary suite unit and it has to be located within the United Counties. So we don't cover renovations to existing units. It must be modest and have design drawings and building permits in place to apply for funding. So
Sorry, what happens if you decide, okay, I built it and then, oh, 2 years I want to sell the property?
I'll cover that in the presentation.
Okay.
Okay. Great. Oh, I've lost my place here. Let's see. Oh, so essentially you need to get approval from the municipality before you're applying for funding with us, because we want to make sure the project is ready to go forward before we tie up funding, because we have a limited pot of money. Once you're at that point where you've got your building permit and you apply for funding, we're looking at construction must start soon. So within 120 days of project approval. And you do need one quote for approval for project costs with your application form.
What does modest mean?
Modest, that's a good question. I don't have a definition for you today on what modest is.
Okay.
From the sounds of what I've heard from the other municipalities, based on a lot of the parameters.
Yeah.
It would probably be modest if it was, you know.
It's not likely to be a 10,000 square foot secondary suite.
Yes, yeah.
Still modest.
Well, I think so, but that's something the county to decide that, that's their thought, so.
Okay.
Eligible costs are costs that you'd be looking at for construction. So plumbing, electrical, framing, drywall, fire separation, doors and windows, kitchen, bathroom fixtures, and soft costs such as permits, taxes, inspection fees, etc. If you do the work yourself, then the labor cost is not an eligible expense. For project eligibility, we do look at the property, as the property taxes do need to be paid up to date. Mortgage payments for the project also needs to be paid up to date. And a total of all the mortgage and other encumbrances that are registered on title, that's the program funding, can exceed the market value of the home. The property must be insured for the full value of the home or project, and property insurance must be verified as up to date. And there cannot be any municipal or provincial work orders on the property, so it needs to be under a good state of repair. Projects that aren't eligible for the funding are anything that's not located within Leeds and Grenville, and no renovations again of an existing unit. Units that aren't located on the property of the primary residence of the applicant or the property of an existing rental unit. And units that aren't subject to the RTA, so retirement homes, long-term care, or crisis care facilities. Once a project's been approved, we do secure the loan on title for the duration of the loan forgiveness period, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. The applicant would sign a promissory note agreement with the counties. I mentioned the construction already, and we confirm annually the rent, mortgage, and taxes of the project once it's built. The payment schedule is done according to construction milestones. So once you get your plumbing pass, electrical, building, and final inspection, it's paid in quarters. And you choose who lives in your unit. So you could certainly have in mind a family member and build it for, you know, an adult child or an in-law or something like that. So you definitely, or if you're just renting it to a tenant that's not related, you definitely would choose as the landlord who's going to reside in your unit. However, the tenant does need to be considered lower income. So they need to meet the eligibility criteria for community housing. Their income does need to be at or below the 60th income percentile. So right now it's 89,000 and have countable assets below 50,000. Locked in pensions and stuff like that are excluded. And assistance from the community housing department can be provided. So let's say if you're a landlord and you need help trying to find a tenant to live in your unit, we can certainly assist with that.
That's the maximum you're allowed to charge?
No, that's the income limit. Oh, sorry, I didn't see the screen.
It's already
Yeah,
spread
that's right. Yeah, so again, to reiterate, the purpose of the funding is to create an affordable unit. So we do have maximum rents. That's a condition for the funding during the affordability period, is that the maximum you can charge is the 80% of the average market rent in Leeds and Grenville. And we do review them each year.
I want it in writing. that if I have an issue with the tenant, that it's heard by the rental board within 30 days.
So that's not something that we would
There
have
we go.
any control over, absolutely, yes. So that's, if you choose to be a landlord, then the counties would not get involved in that in terms of the funding, unfortunately. But,
But like I said, that's part of why you gotta decide if you wanna be a landlord. It is a tough road to hold.
We just. Out of property.
yes,
Yeah,
sorry.
so we have plans to build a tiny home on our primary building, and I'm landlord by the name, we're building it for my mother-in-law.
Okay,
And so there's the $50,000 in assets, included.
yes.
So she'd be selling her other home, like her husband passed away, you know, on her fourth get. So she'll have way more than the $50,000 in assets. And that's something that's negotiable for the application for the grant or.
So unfortunately, it's not the homeowner program is through the province, and that's one of their criteria that they sent. So it does need to be an eligible tenant who's considered low income. So if you have assets above that, then you wouldn't be an eligible tenant for that unit, unfortunately.
But the only reason we'll have that over that 50,000 because she's on her home. Like, other than that, she would fall under the low income. So it's just her assets, which would be temporary, because she's gonna aid us with the funding to build a home, so. Is there a way we can, like, not right now, but discuss this with somebody for the grant or?
Yeah, there isn't an allowance that I'm aware of if they're selling a home. It could be something that you could consider once their assets are below the 50,000, but that is the amount.
And you'd have to look at the exclusions if it was in a pension or something like that.
Yeah, if it's.
So take
if
a look
it's
at
an
all the
attention-
exclusions and.
Mhm. If you want to take my card and email me, we can talk after for sure about what the exclusions are, but yeah, it is definitely an issue in that kind of case.
Sorry, just coming back to that, it says your tenant has to have below that. Do you have to have a tenant signed on before you even do this program to get the money from the program, or how do you prove that your tenant is below that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way it would work is you would there's a referral form. So you would find your tenant and then you would send the form to our office, so the SHR, and it's just a checkbox. So we would then assess them. So they would need to fill out the social housing application form. We would look at their income and assets. So that way, because that's not something that you want to get into as a landlord in terms of going through all that. So we would check the either yes or no, either eligible or not eligible. And then it would confirm that whether the tenant meets the low income
So
criteria.
our tenants would all need to be approved by you to get them into the unit.
Their income and assets only. So you pick the tenant and then you would refer them to us and
Yeah,
then
but
we would then.
there would still be a program that you guys are looking over all the tenants and then allowing them to rent said space.
For the unit that you send us, yes.
And would that have to be approved year over year, or is it just the first?
That's a great question. No, just at move-in. So if their income goes up afterwards or there's changes, then there's no additional review.
What if the tenant changes?
Then it would be the same process. So
Okay.
Mhm.
So long as they're in the dwelling, their income can increase, but the ones that you change tenants, you would have to resubmit that.
that's right. Yeah, thank you.
How
That's a
long
good
do you have to
question.
do that?
Yeah, what was the affordability period?
So the affordability period for the homeowner program is for 15 years and for the landlord program, it's for 10 years.
So as a parent that has a 20-year-old, my husband and I are wanting to sell our home, buy a plot of land so that our son and us can have a permanent dwelling. We would not, as the main owner of the land, would not qualify. But our son, who is making less than $89,000 a year, are we supposed to apply for him for that, as the homeowner, or does he apply?
Yes, so the homeowner is not income tested or asset tested. It's just the tenant that goes into the unit.
He's not gonna be a tenant. He's
Okay.
going to build his home on our land. So as the homeowner, does he apply? Or does he have to own the land as well as the dwelling?
He's going to need to have to own the land because we're putting it on title, but take my card and I can follow up with you just to confirm that that's exact. That sounds very specific and.
Yeah. Okay,
Mhm. Yeah, so yeah, take my card on at the table and we can certainly follow up on that.
When we first came in, we talked about the two-story buildings, okay, using one as a rental unit or the above, whichever one. But now you're saying you can't renovate it to make it available, like, I don't understand, like, I'm missing a point here.
Yeah, so you can renovate a unit that's existing to add a secondary suite. It's just if you already create the unit and apply for the funding later, it's not something that's eligible.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so it's paid according to the construction. Yeah, just to clarify. Yeah, exactly.
Do that through the program.
Yeah, so again, so for the loan forgiveness, once you have met all the, sorry, I threw a slide in just to explain what a forgivable loan is. So it's a loan that's in the form in its entirety, or a portion of it that can be forgiven or deferred for a period of time by the lender when certain conditions are met. So I did give a couple of examples
Was
of
this
that.
online as well?
This is online as
Yeah.
well. So anyone who
This is what
registered
I
ahead
read
of time,
online.
yes,
I
okay.
said to Wendy, she was saying, what is a forgivable loan anyway? I said, you obviously never opened up the email that was sent, because I opened it up and I read. And it makes sense, once you read it, you'd understand it right away.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So if you sign on for the program and you do continue to meet the program requirements for the full 15 years, at the end of the 15 years, the full loan is forgiven for the homeowner program. But we do understand that life changes sometimes. So if you want to go to
So
the
the
next one.
loan decrease as time goes on, but you get to 14 years in, and you go, I'm gonna sell the house. We still owe you 50 grand.
So I'll do the homeowner program first because it's different for the landlord one. It sounds like you're asking about the landlord one. So for instance, in the homeowner one, it's forgiven at an equal rate per year. So if the loan was $15,000, let's say they didn't get the full amount. And after 10 years, $10,000 would be forgiven, so equal rate per year, and then 5,000 would be repayable. So you're certainly able to exit the program early. Let's say you create it for somebody like a relative and then they end up moving out, and then you don't want to rent it to a stranger. Or they move on wherever they end up going.
What would happen if if one of your tenants suddenly came into a better job? Will we have to evict him?
No, so the income isn't reviewed once they move in. After they move in. So it's just at move in, and then if their income increases afterwards, it's not something that would make them move or change the rent or anything like that. So, yeah, no, that's a good
What if they
question.
hit dire straits and go the other way?
You're stuck with them. Good luck.
We don't review their income, so if it goes down or up.
If they're not paying their rent, that's your problem. Not the loans.
So for the landlord program, it is different. We are looking at a full commitment for the 10 years in full. It's not the same as the homeowner program. So if a landlord does sign on for the program, if they want to exit the program early, there is a extra charge that's added that's fairly significant in the first 5 years. And then it can be reduced if let's say they're selling it, if the new owner decides to continue the agreement.
Let's say the tenant that was a nightmare tenant.
Then that would be something that you would deal with through the landlord and tenant board.
Yeah.
It would be,
You're on your own.
yeah. And then, so again, if you find a new tenant to move into the unit, you would refer them to our office for pre-screening and the process would just
So
continue.
the penalty is only as, yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's only if you choose to no longer rent the unit.
And sorry, if you cut out of the program early, pay your loan, then you can rent for whatever price you want.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's say you get so far in and then you go, I'd like to exit the program early, charge whatever rent I want. You just owe
And
whatever is
then you have to leave
outstanding.
it empty for 1 year before you're allowed to increase the rent. You still fall under the guidelines of the rental board.
No, that's not true. So if you have a new tenant, you can charge whatever rent the market will bear.
Oh, yeah.
If you exit the program.
Yeah, I was asking,
Yeah.
if you exit the program early, pay the loan, you can, you feel and you're no longer regulated by.
Yes, yeah, that's
And
correct.
charge them, $10,000 a month with a discount. So that if something goes wrong, we can get rid.
So for all of our program forms are found online at leadsbrendel.com. So either for the landlord program and for the homeowner program. We'll skip to the next slide. You can call our office anytime to talk about the program. So even if you haven't got the building permit yet and you're just looking for information, so a lot of the great questions that you guys have had here, some of them are really unique. Your best bet is to call our office and talk it through, and then we can try to get you the information that you're looking for. So and then that's my contact information. And I guess we kind of did questions as we went, but if anyone has questions for any of us up here, we're happy to help see what we could do to answer what you have.
Planning purposes, so would it be appropriate for the client to submit a site plan showing the secondary unit with offsets, setbacks, before proceeding to the design phase, the actual engineering part of it, to get approval?
Yes, yeah,
Certainly
absolutely.
would be
We
interested,
always
yeah.
recommend a sketch layout,
Yeah.
and then we'll go through the zone provisions at the time. Yeah, any early consultation is always better, so just to rule out any problems down the road.
It's true, make sure that they've been able to have a town meeting.
Just make sure everything can fit on the property appropriately, and like meet all of the required setbacks. You just call us and say you want a free consultation and ask us to take a look at the site plan, and we can review it and send you comments, or we can meet with you in person.
So if the existing property has a bungalow on it, which has a loading occupancy of, let's say, a family of 5. Being a recent build, let's say in the 90s, the septic tank and septic system would have been sized for that appropriate loading. So if there's only 2 people living in the house at the time and you do have a secondary unit. So the actual loading is taken into consideration on the existing septic system, is that correct?
Yeah.
I can answer that.
Yeah, that's more of a building code question.
So septic systems are designed for the number of bedrooms
Yes.
and the number of fixtures that are being used to service that system. So whether you've got 1 person in that house or 10, it all depends on the fixture count.
Okay.
So now if you increase the fixture count, that's when you do the review.
I'll let you pick.
Sorry?
You can pick. whoever
Okay,
you-
I'll just start with the front row and work my way back. Sorry.
That's a bonus sitting in the front row.
There you go, that's the reward.
So what is the, or how can you find out like the status of, the amount of loan, funding that's left? Because you said, obviously you can speak more to Leeds and Grenville, but that there is limited funding. So, is there a point or anywhere you can figure out like, oh, okay, there's still this much left before you to do some work and then realize there's no funding? And can you speak to the Ontario one as well?
So right now we have funding available. We have, I would say,
I wouldn't worry about.
I wouldn't worry about it. But as you get closer to the point where you're looking at starting work, call our office and you can confirm that, because it can change at any time if we get a run on applications or something like that. So
And do you know anything about the Ontario program?
the homeowner program, yes, so our, the Ontario, yeah, so our office is the one that administers that program, so we would be the same contact, yeah.
And so there's no issue right now either.
No, we have funding available for sure, yeah.
When did this program start?
The secondary
The-
suite
the-
program
Yeah,
in Leeds and Grenville, it's been probably 2 years, something like that.
funny, it wasn't really mentioned one of that.
Yeah.
That's part of why we're having the meeting, to get the
that's right.
information out.
I'll ask this lady
14
here.
months ago.
To qualify as a smaller restaurant, do you have to own properties personally, or can they be owned by a business or holding company?
It can be owned by a business, because I believe that's what a lot of the landlords are these days, yes. Thank you.
We'll have one.
I feel like it's moving to the front.
Thanks.
Are tiny homes on wheels, I have a question, are tiny homes on wheels recognized as a tiny home? And because they're not a recreational vehicle, they are a 4th-season home that seems to be becoming quite popular. I have seen them popping up in like Temple, for example, and tiny homes on property, and I was just curious in this area. My second question is,
So go ahead in a second.
my second question is, I mean, there is a trend to tiny homes and the tiny home communities. I just didn't know, is that something that within Leeds and Grenville we're looking at? Where you take like an article of land and create a tiny community of tiny homes with shared services type thing to address some of the housing challenges?
I can answer that. Up to you.
I'll speak to my own community. I know that Augusta in particular has had some inquiries and, there's nothing in place right now, but that's something that. The developer's been looking at in our community, you know, to try to maybe condominiumize, a development, of tiny homes on shared servicing and that kind of thing. So those are options that the municipality is very open to exploring with them. You know, it's very difficult for anyone to build right now or own, so, that's definitely an option that's being discussed in the office, but we don't have anything to talk about really because don't have anything in place right now, so.
See what's happening in Nova Scotia, I think it was one.
You've never seen that.
One
Are
gentleman.
you in Augusta or at this
I'm in Augusta, I was curious about the first question.
Yeah, the wheels.
Okay, and the first question, okay, so again, it all comes down to the specific unit and how it was built and whether or not it was built under a standard. If it was built under a standard, when we take a look at the standard it was built under and determine if it's a problem. For the most part, though, what they are is they put wheels underneath it to make it easier to transport. They weren't really necessarily meant as being part of the home. So in general, when you get to the host community, you're going to have to put a foundation under it. But there's a million different types of foundations, including deformation resistant foundations, which is a fancy way of saying blocks. Okay, so again, reach out to the individual community that you're hoping to take it to. And also ask when you're buying the home, what, like I said, ask the question. Was it built by one gentleman in the middle of the back of his shed and it didn't have any inspections, or was it done under a CSA standard at a factory built place? Or was it done under a proper program where it was built, the municipality inspected it? And we go from there.
Allow for this program, I think right at the beginning you said that tiny homes on wheels do not qualify for this program.
That's not what they said.
No,
A recreational vehicle or a trailer or a mobile home isn't a tiny home.
Yeah, it's not the same thing. They're slightly different. That's why I said the standard's important.
so would they qualify for this grant?
Yeah, there's minimum square footage, and like I say, it all comes down to how it was inspected or what standard it was built under.
Okay, and then gentleman back there.
Actually,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Say, if you already started construction, you're not eligible, or is that,
Oh, for the funding program?
yeah?
So yes, it has to be for something you haven't started construction, yes. Yeah. If it's
Yeah.
already.
Are you that far along?
Yeah.
We can't undo it.
Okay, who is that? I haven't,
Along the lines of construction, one of the points on there is, of course, construction has to begin within 120 days. I'm assuming there's some leniency on these. Like, I look at my neighbor and how long it took his garage to be delayed and delayed and delayed. That was a simple garage. Is it enough if I just start digging a hole in anticipation of a foundation that I meet your 120 days? I assume the counties are a little bit flexible with this. Or is there standards that you meet?
that's a question I would have to take back. We have our asset supervisor, who's the one who follows the projects once they're started. So he would, unfortunately, I don't have that with me today as to what counts as a start, but I can follow up with you on what that means. However, what I can say is if we have a good amount of funding, what we do for a lot of our programs is if we know that you have, like, as it gets closer, we can conditionally approve it. And then once you have an idea when you're starting, we can then sign the funding agreement to lock it in. And then within 120 days, then you'll be close enough. So if you know it's coming, we just can hold the agreement until then, as long as we have a good fund.
Septic, I'm in Spencerville, right, but rural, so I could do my septic, for example, that would kind of
high-end.
Without knowing much about building myself, I would say that sounds like. a pretty
It
good
sounds like it
start.
sounded like you started.
I would, if I could just maybe mention to you that I think before you can get a septic system, you're gonna have to at least have a design of the building that you're gonna.
Oh, yeah, all of that happening, but all of that is
So that-
having research is not construction having started.
So that
Yeah.
process is enough of an indication that you're gonna start something.
The building permit count as a start.
No, unfortunately, it doesn't, because you'll need the building permit to apply for the program. Thank you. There's a fellow at the back first, I think, who is, had his hand up.
Back to the tiny home on wheels question. So if the home is built to meet building code standards. And speaking to your three municipalities, is there a provision that it can be on wheels and skirted and insulated and still meet building code standards?
Okay, I can speak to Prescott. It would still need to have a proper foundation, which means at least the deformation resistance, meaning blocks. It's not that complicated to build and you can skirt it around and insulate it and stuff like that and hook up to the thing, but yeah. It's not a case that it's just left on the wheels and you can take it away that second. It'll take at least a couple hours to pull everything out and unhook it and get it out, so.
Right, so there isn't a restriction of wheels have to come off.
No, the wheels can stay on, but it will have to have a proper deformation resistant foundation underneath it, so.
And sorry, was that just for Prescott?
Well, I'm speaking for Prescott. Sometimes there's zoning issues for deformation resistant foundations. I don't know for your two communities if there is. so.
In Augusta, unfortunately, our chief building official was ill. But yeah, my chief building official, I don't speak building code, if she tells me it qualifies as a dwelling under the building code, then that's sufficient for the zoning. So Karen's card is out there, so if you have any questions about a specific structure, that she would be happy to speak to that, but that's a building code.
I would say that, it would have to be on some type of a foundation. And of course, if the wheels are off the ground, that's not a problem. But it definitely has to be supported on some type of a foundation, and make a variety of foundations that you can do.
Sure, but you don't have a restriction for wheels. The wheels don't necessarily come in.
They don't have to come off, but you can use them as part of the supporting mechanism of
Fair
the structure.
Okay.
Augusta Township. Septic systems is the thing I'm concerned about, like, we built in '86, so I'm thinking we got a good stand to tank. But how do you go about getting a review whether you need
So
to
you,
improve your system or, like, if we were to build this. Something with the counties, whatever, a separate building, maybe a separate, where do you go to get it?
yeah, so South Nation, it used to be the health unit, did septic approvals for municipalities, but South Nation Conservation has taken that over for Augusta and for Edwardsburg Cardinal. So they have all the existing septic records there, may have the records for your property. And you can, either contact a septic installer, or you can contact South Nation directly yourself and reach out to me or Wendy, we can get you a contact at South Nation to talk about your project, what the capacity is and what kind of upgrades you might be looking at. Again, whether you want to upgrade your system in Augusta or whether you want to look at a smaller system for a second unit, again, that's a conversation to have. with
And it's
South
a
Nation.
real quick phone call because we did it, remember with Susan? I called and spoke to them and they bought up the information on the house. And yet our tank is big enough to take another one.
Yeah.
Right away.
Yeah, just touch base with me, my card's out there too, and I can get hooked up with,
Yeah, I think it was maybe early with, when South Nation started.
Okay, yeah, yeah, it's taken a little while for all
Yeah,
the
they
permits and
advised
data to get transferred over. I think to help you, I think as of the end of this month, it's fully out of it now, so
Yeah.
South Nation should have everything.
We need consideration.
Yeah, when he got survey at South Nation is the chief building official
But
there.
they said I'd have to get a engineering type person to submit something to the South Nation to review the system. Like it's something that's, sound like
You can still contact the South Nation Conservation Authority and ask them if they can give you a copy of your septic.
Okay.
Because
That's a good thing.
they would be on file.
$80.
And then that gives you something to start with. You still may have to get a designer to look at it, but.
Yeah, I just wanted
But
somebody
you
to
can
look
get
at it.
the information is there.
Yeah, that's what I needed to start with, and I wasn't getting anywhere with them, so maybe they were just getting into the,
Well, it's been a year of them learning, all the old, files.
yeah, all right, so we'll go back to it,
It's still a challenge for them.
yeah. And just, what's with mobile homes, like, why is municipalities against mobile homes on individual properties? I just.
a planning.
The new mobile.
Yes, I know what you're saying.
Back in the 30s and 40s. Like we actually bought and lived in a mobile home for 15 years in the mobile home park. At the time, we needed 10 acres. And I'm thinking, what's the difference? You got 200-foot frontage with 10 acres behind you. Like, I just don't get it. Like, it's a modular home, so.
Again, that comes down to the community that's hosting you. And different communities have decided to go different ways with zoning. Some places, and I don't know that we have one, but I've known many communities that have a minimum square footprint you have to have for a house. I've seen lots of different rules, and most of the rules related to mobile homes had to do with how they perceived they wanted their community to go. And so they wouldn't allow mobile homes in anything but areas zoned for a mobile home park. But again, you can still find differences from one neighbor to the next. But like I said, in general, I see it less now. I don't know if you guys still require a mobile home zoning for a mobile home, but
We would,
Yeah.
it's only allowed in.
that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah.
What's happening is they're only allowed in park.
Yeah.
Before they were.
And that's the one with the Z number, the Z number on it, but
The
modular,
standard,
yeah, the modular prefab homes that are factory built and inspected are permitted, it's just those.
So we just talked before though that CSA Z 240 MH as a manufactured home wasn't a mobile home.
Well, I felt it was, but I didn't feel like arguing with it at the time. A277 is a manufactured home. A240 is a mobile home.
So it's not, it's manufactured, and at the.
Like I
MH is
said, it wouldn't
manufactured.
matter in Prescott, so it didn't matter.
But as long as
The
the,
building code recognized said 240 as a mobile home. That's what they say the standard is.
Well,
The Ontario, bill, right or wrong, they should probably change it, but that's what it says. They said
Yeah, and
240 is a mobile home.
that's gonna be, I think, an issue with the tiny home builder, because they're.
Most of them are doing pretty good. They're either going with the new standard that's being created for them, or most of them are being built and inspected.
Can you speak to that new standard?
I can speak to it only because I'm part of the OBOA and I know it's coming, and I do know that the place in, I wanna say it's Mallorytown will probably be one of the first that gets approved for it, but
Cabin?
yeah, Redwood Cabins or something like that. I can't remember the exact name, but. I can say this, Prescott does not have any conditions on the size of the building, so a tiny home would be welcome in Prescott, so.
It's just a certification.
Well, it's just making sure it's built to properly. Like I said, it's either certification or it's inspected by the building host where it was, like I said, in Brockville, it's Sebastian that's doing all the inspections. Once it gets here, it gets inspected by us, so. Just for the foundation and the hookups and stuff, so.
I just want to bring up a point, there is a tiny home developer, there's a business coming to the industrial park in Johnstown that is. I believe I'm correct in saying this, that they're gonna be building tiny homes, auxiliary dwellings, that sort of thing.
You're
Is
thinking
that
about
something new coming to the industrial park?
Elantra has purchased a parcel of land in our industrial park and they build prefabricated buildings. They, I know they do intend to expand into tiny homes. I don't know if that's gonna be on their site in Johnstown. They have 13 locations across eastern Canada and into Ontario. So not positive that there'll be tiny homes made in Johnstown, but still possibly by that company in the near future. We're looking forward to it.
So they would be already covered with this area, right? Somebody would be looking to purchase tiny home, they've been inspected and.
Again, as long as they've got it, until we know.
Yeah, if they were to build tiny homes but at that site, then they would need a building permit from us.
Get a, permit from us and then we would, do the required inspections and sign off.
Until they get certified.
Until the certified, yeah.
Just a clarification question, piggybacking off this gentleman, septic for Augusta Township.
Okay.
Secondary tiny home dwelling. You did mention in the presentation, there is potential if everything worked out, they could have their own standalone septic system.
In Augusta, yes,
In Augusta.
our zone provisions say it just has to be service, it
Yeah.
doesn't, it doesn't
And
say.
but
it has to be
do
shared.
power and well have to be shared? They can all be separate.
Yeah, in our zoning, yeah, there's no.
As long as you have the land.
Okay, normally, I don't know, but, normally it's 1 acre. Okay, to have a septic
For well
system,
and septic.
for well and septic, you have to have at least 1 acre of land.
That's typically
Okay.
when you're severing a brand new lot, typically.
What is the,
Well, it depends on, zones and municipalities, it can vary from about 2 acres to down to an acre, obviously Prescott's quick servicing, so I'm not sure they got tiny lots.
Not as tiny as you'd think
Not
some
as
days.
tiny, okay.
They could be tinier.
And I guess right now it's 2 acres, in our settlement areas, it's an acre, depends on the zone, depends on the area. The acre typically was because, it was kind of based on a groundwater study, most of our lot sizes, to make sure we've got adequate sufficient groundwater in the county. Also, the health unit at the time didn't want you, say your septic failed, they didn't really want you digging up your septic, they wanted you to have another location on the property where you could put a septic, another system if your system failed. So that's kind of why that we had the bigger lot sizes, so, but if you have an existing lot, you don't have to meet the minimum. You have development rights, because the lot's already there, it's only if you're coming and severing a brand new lot that you need to meet the current standards, which might be bigger than what you got. So,
okay, well, to address that, right, you already have, right, you put in the 2 septic
Yeah.
systems.
yeah,
And you're, say, half an acre.
yeah, that's
of
fine,
land,
that's
And you
fine.
decide you're gonna sever it and sell the property. Would it
Well,
be legal?
You can't.
you have to be whatever the minimum is at a time, so, yeah,
Why I'm,
Yeah.
why I'm asking.
yeah.
Well, I know when I went to North Augusta, they said that we can't sever our property, we could put another place on it. We can't
Yeah.
sever because we don't have wide enough, although we have 6.5 acres, we're not wide enough to allow the 2-street address.
But you get 2 houses on it, you just can't split the lot.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point just brought up there. Municipal addressing, so what happens there? You've got a 911 marker for the primary unit. Now you have a secondary unit of the property, so will it be a new 911 marker installed?
It depends on the municipal bylaw.
But it will have a new civic. It might just still say 941 ABC, or it might be 941 123, or it might be 941, 943, and 945.
Okay,
We have many places here where there's more than one civic address on a property. Because we got apartment buildings, right? So
It also depends if there's shared driveways.
shared driveways, all that stuff triggers, that. Like I said, it'd be looked at and a civic number would be assigned, but it would depend on the situation.
Yeah.
Just from a definition, because I know people throw around the term tiny home and all. What is the difference from a tiny home to a small home to a secondary home?
Not much.
The number of letters.
Well, no. In general, a tiny home is considered anything under 400 square feet, is what the Ontario government said, I think was 400 square feet is considered tiny. Anything after that is small. Again, accessory for the most part. I love yours thing, it's 50%, but no one says which one has to be the primary and who has to live in it. So technically, once it goes above 50% for the secondary one you're building, you're just living in the secondary one yourself. And let, oh, is there a maximum? Okay. But I was just saying, you still live here then at that point, so.
Nice loophole there.
Yeah, they could loophole, I like loopholes, but yeah, in general,
As much addition to your house, as long as it's attached to your house, it doesn't have to move 50%.
Well,
It's okay if it's a separate.
like I said,
No,
That's what they told us when I was there. If we wanna build onto our house, like if we wanna build above the garage, we wanna put on a separate garage and use the garages for.
If it's an entirely separate unit, like where there's no connection between
That's
the
where
units,
it
then
falls
it's
under
45%. Yeah.
45%.
If you've got a shared, you're just having family live with you, it's a wing of your house and you have a granny,
Yeah.
you know, wing of your house and there's we just consider part of the whole house and there's no limit on
Like
the
you can
size.
increase the
But
size
if
of
once
your
you
house.
separate it and it's a standalone unit, then that
That's
45 or
the
50%,
45%.
yeah.
I can tell you with the 22 we've had here in Prescott, I've never hit the maximum yet. So it's not, in general, it may sound like something to worry about, but so far it hasn't been an issue.
No, there's lots of other things you brought up that are the issue.
That's what I'm saying. Sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I feel
Yes.
deflated after this.
I think in Augusta, there is this in the bylaws that the secondary unit or accessory unit has to be a minimum of 5 meters or 9 meters away from the primary residence.
There is, but I don't.
See, in Prescott, it comes down to whether or not it's already exists.
Which
The
the,
secondary structure.
okay,
So if it's already existing and it's had permission,
Yeah.
it's no big deal. If
Yeah.
you're building new, then you have to meet the normal setbacks requirement.
but not the setbacks, the actual distance from the main.
Between buildings?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think this building, I
At
mean,
1.2 meters.
1.2 meters, I don't
But
know.
it's like, or sorry, it was a maximum of, so.
Oh, that's
so-
not in Augusta. We don't have a maximum distance between,
We do.
I
Do you?
was, yeah.
Oh, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
For a second dwelling unit.
Cause in Elizabethtown, Kitley, it's like 5 meters and then 9 meters, I think, and like.
But that's what I'm saying, each place is slightly different.
Yeah, so-
Is Elizabeth Town going in with this? Program? Elizabeth Town, Keatley, do you know if they're part of this? program?
Any part of Leeds and Grenville qualifies for the county program.
Yes, yes,
We were
it's
looking
Leeds
at-
and Grenville wide, it's just for tonight, we just focus, because as you can see how confusing it is with 3 municipalities here.
Imagine if we had all of us.
Yeah, so we decided to focus on that area.
When we first were looking here, to purchase a home to live together. Elizabeth Town, Keatley on Elizabeth Street or something, or just off of Highway 2, the McDonald's, yeah. They wouldn't let you put a door to separate, to make it as 2 units. Yeah. Has that been?
Oh, I'm not a building expert, so that's not, the building people would be able to answer that in Elizabethtown, Kitley, but.
Yeah, sorry, just back to the minimum distance, so something like 6 meters. If you were a homeowner and building a secondary, like, it's not that far away. So would something like change that distance, is that something that you're looking at potentially changing, which would be something big, or would that be something as easy as a minor variance? That would be a minor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Keep in mind though, if you're on private servicing, you're carrying a well and septic, so that distance is gonna also be an additional.
Yeah, yeah.
It is very nice out of them.
Just because it's fresh in your mind, I know it was bouncing around the minimum distance and it's per cardinal, right, Spencer, though. You said 6 meters, and I'm just thinking about my property, what's the minimum distance between an existing residence and a secondary, like, we're looking at putting up a tiny home.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say like 1.5 is the minimum.
1.2 is where the building code gets really cranky about what it's built out of, whether it's combustible, how much glazed opening there is, stuff like that. In general, I think your zoning is what, 2 meters apart between structures?
Our bylaw says 2 meters between structures.
Yeah.
Structure.
2 meters between structures.
Like I said, that's where things are split.
Okay, it's just more bad.
The 1.2 meter comes into lot lines where you're adjoining another property.
Yeah, I got lots of.
So the intent there is to maintain a minimum distance between buildings.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of where they're sloping down.
Yeah, like I said, each place is unique and you almost have to submit it and just take a look.
Yeah,
at
I mean,
it.
we intend to do some research, just because I saw you leaping through.
Just what I mean, some.
It's gonna be-
Yeah.
It's on the table out there.
I got one, my.
Okay.
Okay.
All kinds of stuff in here.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. If there's no more, you can always speak to us individually afterwards. We're here for you. It may sound terrible, but we're happy to see development of all types in all three municipalities because it helps the region as a whole regardless of where you decide to build, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, yes. Stop sharing.